the award-winning features writer for the Montreal Gazette. He's going to bring up the three men he's doing a feature on in tomorrow's paper, Dave Stubbs. Dave's book, by the way, is one of the we've got two of his books as the door prizes. Our Game, The History of Hockey in Canada, and this is a book for kids. Kids, they won't want to put it down. Great book. I had a chance to review it with my other hat for the Suburban newspaper. So, Dave.
Mike, thank you. Mike asked me to keep my remarks brief, but what Mike doesn't know is as a sports feature writer, I can't clear my throat in less than 1,000 words. But I will actually keep it brief, although I did want to do a little something special here in that we have three gentlemen who really are legends in the game of hockey. So I'd like to ask Elmer Lach and Dollard St. Laurent and Phil Goyette to join me on stage. Doing a little bit of arithmetic before I came out today, there are 28 Stanley Cups having been won by the guests in this room today, so we are surrounded by some pretty outstanding hockey players. Henri Richard, by the way, has won 11 of those Stanley Cups, and for those of you who have friends in Toronto who like to gloat about the Maple Leafs, you can tell them that Henri Richard has won as many Stanley Cups as the entire Toronto Maple Leafs franchise in history. Pocket, you earned every one of them. I'm just going to give you a few words of introduction. I know these gentlemen have been introduced, but I'm going to begin with the whippersnapper, Phil Goyette. In Phil's first 4 seasons, he won the Stanley Cup. Just showed up for the Montreal Canadiens, won the Cup. Came back the next fall, won the Cup. Piece of cake, right? This is what you do all the time in Montreal. In the 1970s, our mayor, Jean Drapeau, when the Canadians had that wonderful dynasty, issued a press release saying the Montreal Canadiens Stanley Cup parade will follow the usual route. So that kind of gives you an idea of the hockey history here, and Kirk knows well, I mean, the expectations of hockey in this city, and if there were 13 months in the season, or in the year, it would be nothing but hockey here. 16 seasons in the NHL, his first 7 with the Canadians. Phil won the 1970 Lady Byng Trophy in 1970 as the league's most gentlemanly player. Tremendously talented centerman, a first-line centerman on any other team. He was relegated, if I can use that word in quotation marks, to the third line because of the strength of the teams on which he played. Just going to give you a quick joke about Phil Goyette. The gag goes kind of like this. 2 old-timers or men of a certain age are talking about Phil Goyette, saying, so, like, you know, Phil was a pretty good hockey player in his day. How many goals do you think he scored today? And one guy pauses and he says, well, I think maybe he'd be a 20-goal scorer. He says, 20? Phil wouldn't be better than a 20-goal scorer. He says, well, you have to understand, the man is 73 years old. I'd like to move back to the blue line to Dollard St. Laurent. Dolly, as he is known, and he's the biggest dolly I've ever seen, I'll tell you what. He scored 29 goals in his 652 NHL games. That's what Phil scored for St. Louis in 1969-70. So while Phil wasn't exactly spending, or while Dolly wasn't exactly spending a lot of time burying the puck in the net, what he was doing was winning. Here's a man who won 5 Stanley Cups, 4 in Montreal, 1 more in Chicago. And when he went to Chicago in 1960-61, while he was there, that's the last time the Blackhawks won the Stanley Cup. He left, they haven't won since. Is that a coincidence? Maybe not. Still drinking from the fountain of youth, by the way. Dolly, you're 78. So, I mean, you look at a guy like this, and this man is not 78, I'm sorry. And I want to step back to center ice to Hall of Famer Elmer Lach. Elmer turned 89 in January. Looks probably, I don't know, maybe 60, and I don't get too close to him because he still is a very strong physical presence. He's also a very considerate man. When I first met Elmer, I came up to his house in Pointe Claire. Very bad winter day. He was sitting in a wheelchair with a double fracture of his ankle. He'd been outside at the age of 87 chopping ice off his back porch. And he told me as I was leaving, be very careful, just don't fall and break your leg. And there was a pause, at least until you're off my driveway. I've never forgotten that. And when we showed up today and meet Elmer, at least it was raining. There wasn't too much ice on the front porch. They say NHL players are tough. NHL players today, in a lot of ways, don't know tough. And I'm just going to give you a very quick shopping list of Elmer's injuries between 1940 and 54. Fractured skull. When he was wheeled into a hospital, a doctor in the I guess these advanced days of medical care saw him and said, "How you feeling, Elmer?" And Elmer said, "Well, not terribly well, but I'm not exactly sure." So the doctor grabbed his head and started yanking on him back and forth. Only the next day when they took x-rays did they realize that he had a fractured skull. So that's how medical science treated hockey players then. Okay, fractured skull, broken arm, shattered wrist, and dislocated shoulder. That's all in a single crash into the boards one game into his second season with the Canadians. Nose broken at least 7 times. Doesn't show at all, right? You're not born with a nose like that, okay? You just. And it's funny. Elmer came out when I was launching my book in the fall. Elmer came out, signed books, and little kids were sort of coming up, looking around him, and almost like a little scared of the nose. But I mean, he wears it proudly, and he earned every single one of those breaks. Jaw broken twice, maybe 3 times. I say maybe 3 times because he didn't tell his coach Dick Irvin once that he had a broken jaw for fear that he wouldn't be allowed to play. So he just figured he'd keep that quiet. He has since had that jaw permanently wired, cheekbone shattered twice. Foot sliced open with a skate, severing 2 veins, leg fractured, and uncounted stitches, but in the many hundreds. Most famously, Elmer centered, of course, the legendary punchline between Rocket Richard and Toe Blake, the most fearsome line of the 1940s. Elmer won 3 Stanley Cups with the Canadians. He won the Hart Trophy as the NHL's most valuable player in 1944-45. He won the Art Ross Trophy as leading point scorer in 1947-48. And also led the league in scoring in 44-45. That was 3 years before the Art Ross Trophy was even invented. So Elmer would have won that trophy twice. So I would argue that he is the most unsung hero in Canadians hockey history. And I just want to tell you something very quickly about how modest this man is. When I went to his home 2 years ago, and I did not fall on his steps and break my leg, I asked Elmer if he had any pictures of himself with Rocket and Toe on the punchline. And he said, "I really don't know, I may have something. You know, check the basement." So I walked downstairs and looked around. I didn't see anything. And then half hidden behind a hot water tank in a cracked frame that had, maybe 1/4 of an inch of dust on it, was the most spectacular photograph of the punchline I have ever seen. It is absolutely riveting. And I sort of half borrowed that, half swiped it off of Elmer's wall and scanned it and put it in the book. So it's probably my favorite photograph in this book. So it's an absolute honor and a privilege and a delight to be standing on the stage with 3 gentlemen who have won 12 Stanley Cups and are the heart and the soul of the Montreal Canadiens from their absolute glory days. So I'll ask them a couple of questions, but first I'd like to hear you welcome them here today.